The 70s and 80s nostalgia is a common thing these days. There are a bunch of popular movies and TV shows set in that era, and people absolutely love them. The majority of those motion pictures are innocent, focusing on the bright side and the good nostalgic things of those periods. However, today's movie isn't like that, because the plot revolves around children's abductions, which were frequent in those periods. It shows a bleak and realistic picture of the 70s and 80s dreadful side. The year is 1978. The main protagonist, Finney, is playing a big baseball game while his crush is watching. Sadly, he fails to score because the other team has one of the best young players in town, Yamada. The game ends, and Yamada is like, GGWP, Finney. However, Finney is sad because he thinks that he didn't impress his crush. Yamada heads back home while Finney stays on the field to launch his rocket toy. Suddenly, Yamada sees a black van approaching him, and then we get a spooky opening credit that shows us a recent chain of children's disappearances. The next day, Finney and his sister Gwen head to school, and on a bulletin board, they find Yamada's missing poster. They see some kids playing Mortal Kombat in real life, and the kid named Robin absolutely annihilates his opponent with a sick combo. The siblings continue on their way to class, and we see a black van in the background. During a break, local school bullies decide to mess with Finney, but Robin shows up and drives them away. Then he tells Finney that he needs to stand up for himself sometimes, and asks him to come over and help him with math. Then we find out that a boy named Bruce disappeared, and that Gwen, who has psychic dreams, had a dream of Bruce's kidnapping. Two detectives, Wright and Miller, interview Gwen at school, believing she has inside knowledge. But she refuses to help. The next morning, the siblings' father finds out that she talked with detectives and mentioned her psychic abilities. So he beats Gwen because he doesn't want her to end up like her mother. Sometime after, we can see Robin walking around town. The black van pulls up, and an ominous figure gets out. That night, the father gets a call from the police, and he tells Finney and Gwen that Robin has disappeared. The next day, detectives arrive to ask Gwen if she had dreams about Robin's disappearance, but she refuses to help once again, and now we know it's because she's afraid of her father's anger. The siblings go to school, and the bullies attack Finney. Robin intervenes to help, and she manages to take out one of the bullies. Then Finney gets paired with his crush for biology class, and he quickly forgets the beating from earlier. After school, Gwen tells Finney that she will visit her friend, and Finney continues traveling home alone, thinking about his crush. He sees a black van. A man gets out of it and droops his grocery bags. He asks Finney to help, and the man uses that chance to kidnap the poor boy. After some time, Finney wakes up in a soundproof basement and sees the masked abductor. The guy introduces himself as the Grabber, and he promises Finney that everything will be all right and that he won't hurt him. As the Grabber leaves, Finney starts investigating around and finds a disconnected black rotary phone. That night, Gwen gets a call from her father, and she finds out that Finney is missing. Later, before she goes to bed, she prays to God to give her hints about Finney's location through dreams. The Grabber visits Finney, and he tells him how the whole thing is complicated and how he doesn't want to harm him. He sees that Finney is holding the phone, and he tells the boy that sometimes it rings because of the static and that it doesn't work at all. The Grabber leaves, and Finney tries to find a way to escape, but in vain. He lies on the bed, and the phone rings. Finney picks up, but no one answers. Then he falls asleep. As Finney wakes up, he sees the Grabber watching him creepily. He informs Finney that he will need to wait before he gets him some food, and then leaves. The phone rings again. Finney picks it up and hears Bruce's voice, one of the missing kids. And he tells Finney about a floor tile that he can remove to dig a tunnel to escape. Finney immediately starts digging and throwing the dirt into a toilet. That night, Gwen has a dream about Yamada's childhood that slowly builds up to Finney's abduction. The following night, the grabber brings some food to Finney, and as he heads out of the basement, he leaves the door unlocked. Finney decides to take the chance and tries to escape, but then he gets a call from another victim, Billy, the paperboy. His ghost appears next to Finney, but he can't see it. At that moment, we find out that the grabber killed every kid he kidnapped. Billy explains that the grabber left the door unlocked on purpose because it's part of his game. He wants to see if Finney wants to escape, and is waiting to punish him mercilessly. Finney decides to sneak out to investigate and sees the grabber menacingly sitting without a shirt, with a belt in his hands. That night, Gwen dreams of Billy being abducted. She tells her father that her dreams may really help, and he decides to take her for a ride and see if she can see something on the streets that can help her in locating Finney. Finney gets another call from dead Billy, who tells him that he hit a cord cable and that Finney can use it to get out via the basement window. Finney uses a rolled carpet to get a cord around the window's hatch. He manages to open it, but can't find a way to get out. That night, the two detectives speak to an eccentric man named Max, who is staying in the area with his brother and investigating abductions. He tells them about the development of his investigation, and he thinks the grabber is living in this area somewhere, like all the missing kids. The two detectives notice 3 lines of cocaine on Max's table, but they ignore it because he's being helpful. As the detectives leave, we find out that Finney is in the clueless Max's basement, and the grabber is his brother. The next night, the grabber visits Finney once again and asks him what his name is. Finney lies, and the grabber shows him newspapers where Finney's information is. The grabber gets angry at him because he lied, so he drops the food he bought and leaves without locking the door. Then the grabber sits in his kitchen and waits for Finney to sneak out. Finney falls asleep, but he quickly awakens to the sound of dripping water, only to find out that it's blood. He sees a dead boy floating, and then he gets a call from him. His name is Griffin, and he gives Finney the lock combination and informs him that the grabber is asleep upstairs. Finney sneaks out, and he sees a horrifying abductor sleeping. He manages to escape, but the grabber's dog messes up his plan. Finney quickly leaves the house. The grabber wakes up and immediately goes to his van. He catches up with poor Finney and captures him once again. Finney hears from another victim, a rebellious kid named Vance, whom Finney was always scared of. Finney then remembers when he saw Vance at an arcade where he beat up a kid for messing up his pinball game. Finney's memory then transitions to Gwen's dream, as Vance carves the grabber's house number on the kid's arm. We cut back to reality as Vance tells Finney about a hole in the wall he made in the past, and that the grabber fixed it poorly. Following Vance's instructions, Finney breaks a hole in the wall and enters the back of the freezer in the adjacent storage room. But the freezer door is locked tight. The phone rings once more, and this time it's Robin. He confronts Finney and encourages him to stand up and fight for himself. He tells Finney to pack dirt inside the phone receiver to use as a weapon. Then he tells him to practice punching the grabber with the receiver and to create the opportunity for escape. As Finney practices the move, we can see Robin's ghost behind him doing the same. After that, Finney puts the dirt into the receiver and creates a trap for the grabber. Gwen tries to find the grabber's house while cycling through the rain. Suddenly, she sees the ghosts of his victims and falls from her bike. Then she finds out that she is just right next to the house, so she quickly goes back home and calls the detectives. At the same time, the grabber is buying supplies for Finney's burial at the hardware store. Max is carefully watching the town's map, and he has a moment of realization. He quickly rushes into the basement and finds the missing boy. Max freaks out and tells Finney to stay calm and that he will help him. However, the grabber kills him with an axe. The police arrive and rush into the house, only to find out it's completely empty. The detectives begin to think they came for nothing, but one policeman sees a hidden door to the basement. They quickly enter and find the graves of the grabber's victims, and one empty grave that is ready for Finney. The grabber tells Finney that it's time to end their little game, and he will kill him slowly. He brings his dog, and then he heads toward Finney, who dodges him, and leads him to the trap he made. He immobilizes the grabber and starts punching him with the receiver. The grabber manages to grab him, but Finney pulls down his mask. The grabber panics and lets him go so he can cover his face. Finney uses that chance to get the phone cord around the grabber's neck, and he starts strangling him. The victims start taunting the grabber over the phone. Finney snaps his neck and avenges the dead children. Finney distracts the dog with meat from the freezer and exits the house, which turns out to be across the street from the burial site. The grabber bought 2 houses, one for the captives and the other for the graves. Finney reunites with Gwen. The siblings' father arrives and tearfully begs forgiveness for his earlier treatment of them. Back at school, now confident Finney sits next to his crush in class and says to her she can call him Finn. The movie ends there. If you enjoyed this movie recap, make sure to hit the like button. And if you want to see more of these, subscribe to the channel and check out our other videos.